the Baddy versus Justin Gaethje. Why are we here and where do we go from here? Very important. Like if you're a main event, those two questions can be answered by any viewer for any main event. This one's a little bit tricky. And I'll tell you why. Paddy the Baddy's got heat in 5 different directions. Paddy the Baddy and Tsarukyan got something going on. Tsarukyan versus Ilia Topuria, should he return, got something going on. Ilia Topuria versus Paddy the Baddy. Not to mention, we don't fully know what an interim championship means. We don't fully know, but we largely historically can agree that it makes you a number 1 contender, but not all the time. We've seen interim champions not get the title fight. John Jones, Stipe, by example. We've seen interim championships defended. Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blaydes, by example. So, are we guaranteed that the winner of Justin and Paddy draws in to Ilia Topuria? Are we guaranteed of that? Now, I only ask you because for Paddy, you could go in a plethora of different directions in terms of storylines. Justin Gaethje has heat with nobody. Justin Gaethje, like John Anik says, is your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. Justin Gaethje is the highlight. Justin is a veteran. Justin is a proven star and commodity. But where does he go with a loss? Probably to retirement. I mean, according to him. According to him, Trevor Wittman, his coach, the great, simply said, this is our last run. And in theory, the UFC is for champions and for guys that are going to be champion. How do you define that? Well, once you've established that you cannot and are not going to be a champion, at least in theory, your time is done. And according to Gaethje himself, this is his last run to be champion. So I'm only sharing for you. I mean, think about how drastically different this is. Paddy the Baddy, with a win, we assume goes into Ilia, but he could go in to Tsarukyan and a number of other places. Paddy the Baddy with a loss is likely to return to a main event and no less than a co-main event. Justin Gaethje with a win could go against Tsarukyan. He could go against Ilia. With a loss is likely to not fight again. It's drastically different. And so then comes the question of who do you want to win? And that used to be a thing. Like who the UFC wanted to win, that used to be a thing. Back when there was 5 and 6 events a year, you almost needed a certain guy to win to draw into a fight that you could put on a poster, put on a marquee, and that was going to move the entire industry for the next 2 and 3 months. It really hasn't been that way for a meaningful amount of time. I mean, I can just take you back to 2 years ago. There was a great argument of who the sport's biggest star was. And it was between O'Malley and it was between Pereira. And it really just mattered what numbers you wanted to look at, what pay-per-view and what gate. And they both had an argument. But O'Malley, as the champion at Sphere, had one very detrimental matchup, which was Merab, and that's who they gave him. So coming off the heels of that, now your biggest star is Pereira just by default. Pereira had one very detrimental possible matchup, which was Ankalaev. And that's who they gave him. Like, the idea that the UFC would protect or build somebody is just a very foreign idea. It really doesn't happen like that anymore. But you could see where you, the fans, would have a lot more fun going into press conferences and going into the future and even going into a post-fight speech with Joe Rogan if Paddy the Baddy came out on top. And Gaethje is in a hard spot. First off, Gaethje's not a trash talker to begin with. Gaethje's really only ever got into it in the media one time, and it was actually against Daniel Cormier for comments that Cormier made about Islam that Gaethje felt was getting Islam a bump and a potential opportunity that he thought should be his. I mean, that really, if you go back historically, the maddest Gaethje's ever been was when he got into it with Daniel. Now, it's almost too late to change for Gaethje. Gaethje is now a respected veteran. He's an older guy. I can tell you, as a trash talker, when I got older, it got a little bit weird. Unless I was doing it with somebody in my era. Unless I'm doing it with Rampage or Vandalay, I didn't want to go after the younger guy. You know, I'm fighting into my 40s. I didn't want to go talk trash about the 25 or 26 or 26. It just felt wrong. You know, I'm a senior in high school when he's a third grader. Like, it just felt wrong. Almost like as opposed to trash talk, like you're picking on somebody. And I'm only sharing, like, Gaethje is in kind of a unique spot. Gaethje's argument to this fight was, here's my resume, here's what I've done, here's what I have done, and here's my demand. My demand is that you recognize my achievements in the form of a title fight. Not a bad argument. I mean, not a bad argument to the point that it worked. But what if it worked in a regular circumstance? What if it worked had Tsarukyan not been placed in this weird purgatory? What if it worked had Ilia Topuria not stepped aside? What if it worked had Charles Oliveira versus Max not been signed to contest for the BMF belt? They're just questions. I don't have the answers to them. But Paddy the Baddy's why? Why are we here? What are we doing here? What is this fight about? I feel like Paddy's ability to answer that is easier. And I don't know if that's a competitive advantage. I don't know. I can play it through both ways. The fact that Justin Gaethje did not care who the opponent was. He just wanted a belt. He didn't care if it was an undisputed belt or an interim belt, put up a belt. Bring me Tsarukyan, bring me Ilia Topuria, which, by the way, when Justin started this whole give me a title or bust, he was talking specifically about Ilia Topuria, who was the #1 ranked pound-for-pound fighter in the world. That's very honorable. Justin's been in there with the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world before, in Khabib. Worked his way all the way back. But what would have happened? What would have happened if Ilia was still around, if Arman was not in purgatory? Would have Justin really walked away from the sport? And is that a competitive advantage? Does that cause an urgency, or is that 1 foot in and 1 foot out? I give Justin the benefit of the doubt. If you want me to answer my own question, I tend to think it's an urgency. I tend to think he's put himself in a very good position. But one thing that he has made clear is that he's not focused on an opponent. He's focused on an accomplishment, and that's unique. Generally, when a guy goes into a fight, he's locked in on a guy. If that guy happens to have a belt, the byproduct is an accomplishment. It's a little bit of a mix-up. But when you have a veteran like Gaethje, you make exceptions to this. I'm very open to the idea. But what is this fight about? Why are we here? You got to be able to answer that question. And I feel like the answer is easier for Paddy.